what does extreme poverty in rural areas make for in a true crime cake? It makes for weird stuff, hoarding babies, child neglect, drug use, all kinds of weird stuff. And I saw a case that's in the news that says 16 children found in a 12 by 12 room, almost feral. No one's saying anything about what the real pieces of this puzzle are. And I'm going to, because I like controversy. Not really, but I just think it's important we talk about it. So let's get spooky. Hello, everybody. I am Detroit Alley Cat. I love talking about all things paranormal, true crime, anything weird and unusual. And today I am going to talk about one of the most up in focus cases that we've seen in a long time. The 16 children found, multiple kids taken to different hospitals because they're in critical condition. A woman that apparently was married to her husband at 15 years old. The crime is so horrible that the officers, law enforcement called the kids almost feral. And yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. The 16 kids found. They're calling it the Ohio House of Horrors. And a lot of people have said that it reminds them of the Turpin 13. I actually covered Turpin 13. It was one of my first cases. I think I was very shy and not aware of things, so I don't think I did the greatest job, but I did cover it. Did cover it. So it's in my true crime roster if you want to find it. I'm not going to link it because I'm not very proud of it. But the Turpin 13 was this mom that would she just kept having babies, and they weren't letting them go to school. They were chaining them to beds, and they were all different ages. Like 3 or 4 of them were over 18, and they would not let these kids leave. And one of them jumped out the window and got law enforcement. And yeah, the dad actually touched one of the kids, and he got in trouble for that, and they all got taken away. It's a really sad case. I think that the only thing that these cases have in common, well, a couple things to be honest, is that they're hoarding babies. Now, they ended up, I think the Turpin 13 ended up in California, Texas, that side of the country. But I do think they started over here. I think they started Ohio, West Virginia. I'm not going to look up the case. But if that is true, that would be kind of a similar coincidence with this case. Let's talk about this case and then what I've noticed that nobody else is talking about and nobody wants me to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. Ohio House of Horrors. You already know I got my paper and pad because I'm old school like that. June 2026 discovered 16 children ranging 18 months to 18 years old in a 12 by 12 foot room. The dad of the children is Gary Siders Jr. The mother, Elizabeth Siders. She's the mom. And I don't have the exact age of how old the dad is, but I know she's 33. Gary Siders Sr. is the grandfather. And there was an age gap between Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, the mom of these kids. Gary Siders Sr. is the grandfather, and Christina Siders is the grandmother. When the case broke, it was like everybody saw was this picture of this woman. She got married at age 15, and then there was a mark around her arm, and everyone was speculating what the mark around her arm was. I just want to say, I don't think she was chained up with the kids. I could be wrong, allegedly, but I really want to say I think that's a handcuff mark. You guys are seeing? Yeah, a handcuff mark. I'm sorry. I'm laughing. It's not funny. It's not funny. But nobody's deceased, so that's the good news. Now, what's interesting is each faces felony child endangerment charges. Several children required hospitalization. I think like 2 or 3 were in critical condition, and there were 6 other of them that had to go to the hospital, get treated for other stuff. The children were described as having the why can't I talk today? Developmental delays and almost acted feral. I believe that. I do. I believe that. Elizabeth Siders is 33 years old. I know she was I don't know when she was born, but I know the incident happened in June of 2026. And I went to go look for a timeline of events for her personally, and this is what I got. March 31st, 2008, she married at age 15, and she married in West Virginia because you're allowed to get married in West Virginia with your parental consent. So they hopped on over to West Virginia. I don't think they lived there. I think they've been living in Ohio for a moment, and they hopped over there. The parents gave consent. Not none of Elizabeth's parents, mother or father, are saying anything. In fact, they've remained behind closed doors, away from the public. May 2008, 2 months after the wedding, Elizabeth had a baby. Baby number one. Every year since 2008 to 2024 area, she has had repeated pregnancy. The last and here's something else I found out. In 2022, November 20th, she had a premature birth of conjoined twins, which means they were connected somewhere at the Riverside Methodist Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. They died 1 hour later due to respiratory failure, and that was a live birth, not a miscarriage. She also has had 4 sets of twins. One of them was a conjoined, so the other 3 sets of twins are still alive. The last child she had was born late 2024, early 2025. We don't know the exact date. I don't know if that baby was born in a hospital. I don't think so. It's 18 months old. It's a boy. The family lived in Benton County for 4 years before the incident or them getting the children taken away. And the thing is, they said that they jumped around place to place because they didn't want to be found. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know on June 30th, 2026, there was a search warrant and the children were removed. Now, something that you guys should know is the police went there because Gary Siders Jr. had an unrelated indecent exposure charge. He was accused of exposing himself to his neighbors. 3 to 4 different neighbors complained about it. So I also looked up if one of the neighbors was a kid. They didn't say that, so I'm going to assume that it wasn't, because if it was a child, that would be all over the place. Everyone would be talking about it. And other than that, this Gary Siders has only had traffic violations prior. I only found 3 to 4 charges, and they're minor traffic infringements. However, the dad, Gary Sr., had a DUI charge. I'm not gonna, this is kind of jerky of me to say, but if you take a good look at Gary Sr., he does look like he's been doing some drinking. Drinking. That's what he's been doing. I'm sorry. I was just trying to add a little bit of humor in this because it's a very dark situation. Now, Ronnie Fletcher, the brother-in-law, I don't know what brother-in-law because it didn't tell me, said he had no idea about these 16 kids. Elizabeth had become isolated after the marriage. Well, yes, that does make sense. She's busy having babies. I don't know if she even had a phone. The attorney said, now this attorney is kind of weird. I've watched his interviews and he doesn't like particularly do a lot for his clients. He's just, I don't think he can get very much out of them, to be honest. He says that they live in extreme poverty and that Elizabeth wants to be reunited with the kids. The attorney says there's no evidence that these kids were held in this 12 by 12-foot room. This is his job, folks. He's supposed to say stuff like this. He also says that Elizabeth says a large family is a gift from God. Now that's important. That's important. Gary Sider Sr. was released due to medical reasons, and now they're having his competency being reviewed. Yes, he does not look like he has competency. They've done interviews with Gary Jr. and Gary Sr. in the same room. I don't know why. Maybe they're sharing the same attorney. And every time they talk to Gary Sr., he's so out of it. I don't know if he's had strokes or I don't know. He looks like he's been through the ringer, guys. I don't think he was aware at the end of what was going on. There's just no choice. He's in a wheelchair, and I don't think he can even talk. Now, that would leave Gary Jr. in charge. Sider's family lived in Hampden-Benton County, Ohio, southern Ohio. Now, this is what I want to talk about. Nobody's talking about. They live, and I don't know how to say this properly. I hear so many different ways of saying it. I'm going to call it the Appalachia. The Appalachia. Everybody's heard of the Appalachia. Most people have heard of the Appalachia. What is the Appalachia, you ask? Well, that's a 13 state mountain range of over 206 miles, and the federal government recognizes it for its own culture and area. It's that vast and it has its own culture. Now, what is this culture, you may ask? Well, they're God-fearing people. They are survivalists. They are creative. They live in rural areas, and it's very colorful and interesting. And I could talk about Appalachia forever and all the different folklore that's attached to it, but these people live in the hills, and I'm just going to tell you a little tiny bit about them. My family is from the Appalachia. So I can reasonably tell you about this. Most of these people, I would say about 300 or 400 years ago, there were these wars in Scotland and Ireland, and a bunch of people got on the boat and they headed over here to what we call the US of A. And once they got here, they ran for the hills, or as you guys like to call Appalachia. And what do you do after you've been in a war? Well, you hide. You hide, you recover, you get better. Years and years go by of this hiding, and it becomes, I think, a little unhealthy personally. But these people, they live in these mountains, and these are these people. And some of them live in these cities and it's normal and it's completely fine, but some of them live in these rural areas and you can sit there and say that everything's fine, but it is not. It is not. Some of these areas are extreme poverty. And you know what? I just wanted to do some researching just to prove my point. Have you guys ever heard of a YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly? I'm not personally a fan. Some of you might be. I have my reasons. But he became famous by videotaping a family called the Whitaker family. They're about 80 to 100 miles away from the Sider family. Now, why is that important, you might ask? Well, the Whitaker family is advertised online and on the YouTube as being the most inbred family in the United States. How nice that that man did that for them. And yeah, and well, he actually shows you footage of them, which I would argue to say is degrading. But he shows these people and they're very messed up. They're very, very messed up. And I almost see if you look at the Sider father, Gary Sider Sr., and the Whitaker family, you can see some similarities there. And I don't know if it's from inbreeding or not, but I would definitely say it is from a lack of medical care and resources. Because how are you supposed to get help if you're an alcoholic and there's no AA meeting or any AA like rehab around or anybody paying attention to the fact that you need help or you don't have a psychiatrist to talk to you? Or how is this girl supposed to get, what is it called, prenatal help, Elizabeth Siders, if she's in this rural area? I don't even think people knew that these babies were there because it's in such a rural area. And this is just how the Appalachia can be in some areas. And hoarding babies, That's a thing. That's a thing. And talking about how it's God's will, well, the Turpin 13 did that too. They talked about God. And it's always about God when you start hoarding babies. And I don't necessarily think it began as them wanting to do this, but sometimes the education and the resources for the education, people watching, it's just not there. It's just not there. And the whole thing with the inbreeding in the Appalachian Mountains, I don't think sometimes that they it happens on purpose, but like say for instance, you're on this hill and from like the next 60 miles, there's only your cousins on this hill. Well, you start watching your cousin every day, and that's the only person you watch. That's it. That's all you have access to. Then you just get married, and then cousins are married and they have babies and they marry their cousins. And then all of a sudden you have all these bad birth effects. And nobody wants to talk about that, but I do. I do. Yeah. I went back to go visit my family in that area. And, it's sad, really. It's really sad. They were hoarding cats. And I felt really sad because houses were worn down. And if you're watching me, I'm sad for you. I'm not gonna say who you are. And I hope you got out of there. But a lot of those people need help. They do. And we're not going to help them by not talking about it. Is it letting the government stick their nose in their business? No. But it's definitely setting up shop in there and asking them like, "A, do you still want to be there? If you don't, we can help you relocate." Or B, maybe some of this governmental money that we see like being put in areas I don't think it needs to be, maybe going out towards these rural folk living in these areas that need help. Like maybe you should be doing door to door nurses checking up on people, accountability with children. They're having babies at a hospital and nobody checked up on these babies. Yeah, so I do think that the fact that they were in the Appalachian area has a lot to do with this situation, and I just think it's crazy that not one freaking person wants to talk about that. Like, are we not gonna talk about the facts? They're in the Appalachian area, Appalachia. And that area's got issues. Even the people in that area know that they have issues. I saw the people talking about it when they were getting interviewed. They're like, "No, it's so rural here that nobody even knew that they were back here." And I'm sorry. I think there's a chance that these people just were carrying on doing whatever they wanted to do. And I don't know if they necessarily were doing this on purpose, but like I don't know what those law enforcement saw. I can only imagine being locked in a room 12 foot by 12 foot, and these kids are covered in God knows what, and there's food hoarding and a shortage of food, and it's just really awful, really, to be honest. It definitely is a house of horrors, and I'm cracking jokes, and I'm doing it because I talk about this awful stuff, and I don't know how else to handle it. But yeah, these kids are gonna need a lot of help. I hope they all survive. They're gonna need help probably learning everything. They probably have never been to school. Never. And that's just the way of some of these areas. They're so rural that there's just no way to keep track of what's going on. People have babies. They don't even go to hospitals. And that's the thing, like, that electric forest baby was born, and everybody's like, "That woman would have needed to go to a hospital." Well, I'm here to tell you there are plenty of people up in those mountains that are having babies that are not gonna go to a hospital. Number 1, because their family don't want them. Number 2, because God will take care of you. People really do believe that kinda stuff. I think religion is a good thing, and I think that your God will take care of you. But you still need to give your child every every chance of survival that it possibly can. And I think that we do need to talk about the fact that these people lived in this area. And you want to know what else is crazy that I found out? Have you guys ever heard of the Mothman prophecies? Now you're saying, what does this Mothman prophecies have to do with this? Well, let me tell you what this has to do with this. About 60 miles away from Benton County is where Point Pleasant is. Point Pleasant is where the Mothman Diaries, or not Mothman Diaries, prophecies happen. And that's basically where a whole town of people started seeing a Mothman. And it was almost like they were having a premonition of doom. And lo and behold, this bridge falls while all these people are on this bridge, and a whole bunch of people die. This is the kind of stuff that happens in Appalachia, and this was only 60 miles away from where the Siders lived, and I just think that's kinda interesting. There was also another famous case called the Sodder, which is so very close to cider, that is weird, that 5 kids went missing after a fire started. This was in Kentucky. Appalachia is huge. And they went missing. It's a very famous case. These kids were never recovered. Am I saying that they are all connected? No, I'm not saying they're all connected, but I do think that for how rural that area is, you should take a look at how strange things can happen, if that made any sense. How strange things can happen. I'm probably going to think about that all night. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that because I myself have come from the mountain people of the Appalachia, but now I'm a city girl. At least that's what they call me. But sometimes if you listen real close, you can actually hear that little twang in my voice, which I don't try to talk about it because if I do, then you hear it even more or I say it even more. I don't know. It's a bad domino effect, to be honest, of my voice. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my personal thoughts, opinions on what's happened with this family. I hope this Elizabeth Siders can tell her point of view, get help, maybe rehabilitated. She's in a holding facility right now, and you know what? I bet she's probably happy there. She wants to see her children. Honest to God, I don't think that's the best thing for the children, to be honest. But she's in a holding facility where she's being fed, getting medical care, and probably some psychiatric care. So that's probably the best thing for her right now. I'd love to hear what Mr. Gary Siders, what is it? Not senior, junior has to say. But if I was to take a guess, I would say that there was some problems with education and such. And with him exposing himself, I think some more things are going to come out. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. I hope for this family to be rehabilitated and everyone to be safe. And that's all I got for you folks. So stay safe, stay spooky, subscribe, like, comment, share. I don't know why you would share, but they tell me to say that. So share. But yeah, have a great day. Stay cold.